Chapter 436. Old Man. The voice Su Ming delivered through his divine sense could only be heard by the spirit of Nine Yin. The old man by the side could not hear it. Once the reviving gigantic warrior statue heard Su Ming's words, he turned his head around swiftly and stared at him. At the same time, his body stopped regaining life. The old man was stunned. "You have scattering dusts." Su Ming took a few steps back and looked at the statue, whose voice was reverberating like thunder in his head. "Sir, if I want your protection, how many scattering dusts do you require?" Su Ming sent his divine sense out with a calm look. However, the old man was not stupid. He saw the statue looking at Su Ming at that moment, and knew that the unexpected occurrence was due to him. But this place banned fights, and they were not the ones who chose the spirits of Nine Yin. They were chosen based on the will of the spirits of Nine Yin. At that moment, he stared at Su Ming coldly, and while there was aloofness in his eyes, there was also a freezing glare, along with contempt. After all, the amount of shaman crystals required to obtain the protection of this spirit of Nine Yin was too great. He did not believe that this person would be able to produce this amount of shaman crystals. "I want 10 scattering dusts every 7 days. Even if you only have 10, I will still protect you for 7 days. If you only have 5, then I will protect you for 3 days and a half. If you only have 1, then I will protect you for 1 day." As the voice of the spirit of Nine Yin echoed in Su Ming's head, he started calculating how many scattering dusts he had in his disposal. He only had less than 200 of these pills right now, but as long as he had enough materials, then he could immediately start making them, and he was incredibly familiar with the procedures of making this pill, so even if he would end up wasting some, he would only waste about 1/10 of materials. "Would you accept South Asundus?" Su Ming mulled over his thoughts for a moment before he sent his divine sense into the statue once again to test waters. "South Asunder. You have South Asunder." Strong light immediately began shining in the gigantic statue's eyes. Even the voice that was reverberating in Su Ming's head had become agitated. His body started trembling slightly, and the halted revival was activated once again. However, his eyes were fixed on Su Ming, and he no longer paid any attention to the old man. "Sir, you're going overboard. Leave immediately, if you continue fighting over him with me." The old man immediately became nervous and growled threateningly at Su Ming, but before he could finish speaking, the gigantic statue suddenly stretched out his left hand and grabbed the old man. As the old man cried out in surprise, the statue tossed him down the mountain. "Get lost. Don't bother me when I'm making a deal." That old man's body immediately turned into a long arc and he was tossed down the 4th mountain. "It doesn't matter whether it's South Asunder or Mountain Spirit, if you bring 5 of either, I will offer you 7 days of protection." The statue's voice buzzed in Su Ming's head. He was incredibly excited by the mention of South Asunder. After all, he had been here for many years, and while he had met people who brought out scattering dusts before, most of the time, the number was incredibly small, and the effects of the pills were weak, making it painfully obvious that they had obtained it from some spot in the world of Nine Yin. However, Su Ming gave him the feeling that he had quite the number of this pill, and he had even mentioned South Asunder. This made the spirit of Nine Yin excited. "Looks like you found a pill storage. How about this, if you have better medicinal pills like spirit plunders, then with just 1, I will protect you for 60 days. If you think that my power can't satisfy your requirements, then I know an old man in the 5th mountain who should originally have been in the 6th layer. But if you shamans want to get up there, you would need to be at least a latter shaman or else it'll be difficult for you to get in there." That's why the old man came down to the 5th layer. 1 spirit plunder and he will protect you for 10 days. I'll go and talk to him, perhaps we can increase the time he can protect you, but the condition is, you have to give me South Asundus and scattering dusts. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes and he immediately asked, "That old man you speak of, what is his level of cultivation?" "By your standards, he's an end shaman," the gigantic statue immediately said, and an expectant look appeared on his face. Su Ming's heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to go to many places in the world of Nine Yin. That Candle Dragon's corpse alone was already a place he wanted to go to. Then there was the burial ground of spirit mediums, which might be of help for awakening the 7th head in Han Mountain Bell and allow him to obtain the 100 million souls devouring heaven art. Then there was the deal about the thought soothsayers as well. If that altar could make thought soothsayers appear, then if it was possible, Su Ming would like to go and see the birthplace of thought soothsayers. Also, his main purpose was the 9 Abyss flower. This flower could increase the chances of surviving through a life-threatening crisis when one was entering the Berserker Soul Realm once they attained great completion in the Bone Sacrifice Realm. This was an item that Su Ming had to get no matter what. Also, he had to think about the problem of his identity possibly getting exposed. If that happened, then if he could obtain the protection of a spirit of 9 yin at the level of an end shaman, then he could be like fish in water in this place. In fact, it would even be possible for him to go and explore the area 1 million lees away. All right. Once he thought about it, Su Ming nodded and brought out a small bottle from his bosom, then threw it at the spirit of 9 yin that had completely regained its life. That spirit of 9 yin grabbed that small bottle, and with a method, from which Su Ming could not even feel any ripples with his divine sense, laughter came from under the spirit of 9 yin's helmet. My name is Li Hua. According to the treaty made between my tribe and the shaman tribe, I am willing to serve you. As Li Hua laughed, he took a step forward, and once he stood before Su Ming, he lifted the gigantic battle axe, and the action caused howling sounds to reverberate in the air. A violent gust of wind swept through the area. Li Hua's huge body rapidly shrank in that wind and turned into a dark silver light that charged towards Su Ming's left hand. He suddenly lifted his right hand and received that dark light with that hand. The dark light hesitated for a moment, then turned into a mark on the back of Su Ming's right hand. It flashed a few times. Boy, let's go to the 5th layer. I'll tell you where that old man is, or else it'll be very difficult for you to find him. Li Hua's voice echoed in Su Ming's ears. Su Ming dipped his head down and looked at the mark on the back of his hand, then lifted his head before moving briskly towards the top of this mountain. He was not afraid of this Li Hua causing any problems. He had still one chance to use the power of the god of berserkers, and there was enough power in it acting as a deterrent even if he did not use that one last chance. Even if that person had the power equivalent to an end shaman, Su Ming could still intimidate him. After a moment, Su Ming arrived at the top of the mountain, and as the light from the relocation rune shone, he disappeared within. When he reappeared, he was already on the 5th mountain. Besides him, only Nan Gong Hen was in this mountain. Nan Gong Hen was moving about the mountain, occasionally coming to a stop in search of a silver statue that he thought would be more reasonable. He had seen the light from the relocation rune in the 4th mountain, but did not pay too much attention to it. He simply continued browsing through the few statues in the mountain. It was only when he was at the mountainside that his footsteps come to a halt and he looked towards the mountain staircase in the distance with a strange look. He saw Su Ming slowly walking up the stairs. He blinked. Then Nan Gong Hen let out a dry cough and gave Su Ming a smile. When I saw the light from the 4th mountain's relocation rune, I was wondering who it was. I didn't expect it would be you, Brother Mo. Since you're here, why don't we take a look around together? When Su Ming saw Nan Gong Hen, he wrapped his fist in his palm and greeted him with a smile with his usual calm look on his face. I was expecting to meet you here, Brother Nan Gong. You mentioned before that you were going to choose a spirit of 9 yin here. Brother Mo, it seems like I've made a fool of myself before you. All of the spirits of 9 yin here need several millions of shaman crystals before we can tempt them. In truth, if I had not made preparations for this, I wouldn't choose any of the spirits here, Nan Gong Hen said with a smile, and there was a slightly pleased expression on his face. After all, the amount of shaman crystals he had to spend to choose a spirit in the 5th layer was enough to render anyone speechless. Nan Gong Hen pointed at a statue and started providing explanations to Su Ming. Come, Brother Mo, let me introduce you to this place. Look at this spirit of 9 yin, his armor is giving off pressure, but his weapon is a scimitar. This spirit should be one specializing in defense, but his battle prowess is slightly weaker than the other spirits of 9 yin here. When Su Ming looked over, he heard Li Hua snorting coldly in his ear. Your companion didn't reveal much. Ta Ka scimitar is so sharp that if I ran into him, I would feel my skin crawl. His armor, however, is rather mediocre. Nan Gong Hen continued introducing the statues to him and would occasionally place his hand on the statues to find their price. Su Ming always had a smile in place and did not open his mouth to speak much. All this while, he was listening to Li Hua rebutting Nan Gong Hen's views, and by the end, he was looking down on Nan Gong Hen even more. Brother Mo, you might not be able to provide any offerings in the fifth, but you can look around as well to broaden your perspectives. I walked up to the fifth layer in the past as well. As Nan Gong Hen spoke, he arrived at a spot where two statues stood erect on the other side of the mountain. One of the statues was large and the other small. The big one was 400-something feet tall, while the small one was only 200-something. That small one did not hold any weapons in his hands and looked incredibly ordinary. The big statue, on the other hand, was holding a long spear, and he looked incredibly heroic and extraordinary. Nan Gong Hen placed one hand on each of the statues. After a while, a brilliant light began shining in his eyes. He looked at the statue that was 400-something feet tall and excitement filled his face. Brother Mo, look at this spirit. His price is 32,000 shaman crystals per day, and he's the most expensive statue in this place, but don't just judge him because he's expensive. This spirit is definitely the strongest one here. Look at the spirit beside him. His price might only be 20,000 shaman crystals per day, but I definitely won't choose him. Nan Gong Hen was originally still wavering about his decision, but when he saw Su Ming standing by his side, resolution immediately appeared on his face. I'll choose this one. As he spoke, he placed his palm on the statue again. Idiot, Su Han might be in the fifth layer, but is definitely not the strongest. Your friend's an idiot. That old man beside him is the frigging strongest monster here. That's what the old man likes. He'll use himself to set up a contrast and to serve as a comparison to scare Su Han so that he will raise his own price. Just you watch. A large part of the offerings Su Han obtains will be given to the old man. Boy, the one I'm talking about is him. Place your hand on him, I'll talk to him. Li Hua's voice traveled into Su Ming's ears. Su Ming cast a glance at Nan Gong Hen with a wry smile, because he knew that even if he advised him against it, Nan Gong Hen would also not listen to him. He then walked towards the statue that was only 200-something feet tall. Chapter 437. You have a good eye. Nan Gong Hen's statue shone with a strong light, and the statue started rapidly regaining life. At that moment, Su Ming pressed his right hand against the 200-something feet statue. Nan Gong Hen also saw Su Ming's actions, but he did not bother himself too much with it. In his eyes, Su Ming was just checking out the statue's price. Even if the statue was not expensive, not all people were capable of making offerings to him and taking him away. I browsed through the entire mountain once, and the price for this one is the highest. The prices offered by the spirits of 9 yin are based on their abilities. If he dares make this price, then I will pay for it. By the looks of it, he's the strongest in the fifth layer. Nan Gong Hen might be finding it painful to part with the shaman crystals, but he trusted his own judgment. As he watched the light from the statue shine in an area that spanned to 100,000 feet, as the incredibly extraordinary statue looked as if it was about to completely regain life, and as light shone in his eyes, his breathing started quickening. After a moment, once the statue was completely revived, he lifted his long spear and struck the ground. At the same time, he shot up in the sky with a whistle. Only a pair of brightly burning eyes could be seen on his face, which were covered by the helmet. He lowered his head and cast Nan Gong Hen a glance. That gaze was slightly strange, as if it contained an array of complicated emotions, a deep sentiment. By the treaty formed between my tribe and the shaman tribe, I am willing to serve you until you are no longer able to fulfill the requirements of the offerings. The spirit of 9 yin in midair said these words slowly. His voice echoed in the area, and humming sounds could be heard, making him sound incredibly exceptional. Nan Gong Hen was just about to fly up excitedly when the statue on which Su Ming had placed his right hand immediately started shining by his side. The light was incredibly dim, but the statue was rapidly regaining life. An ancient gaze gradually appeared where his eyes were. Nan Gong Hen was momentarily stunned, then widened his eyes swiftly. Brother Mo, you rented him. Nan Gong Hen sucked in a deep breath, and his face was filled with disbelief. Once he saw Su Ming nodding his head, Nan Gong Hen's expression immediately became strange, and he opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but after a moment of hesitation, he cast Su Ming a compassionate glance. While Nan Gong Hen might find himself in a sort of disbelieving state in regards to Su Ming's financial power, but the truth was right before him. The other must have some sort of means and methods to obtain money, which no one else knew about. However, Nan Gong Hen thought that Su Ming's choice was kind of not worth it, or perhaps more accurately, it was extremely not worth it. Brother Mo, you should have told me sooner. There are plenty of spirits of 9 yin here that are. Oh well, since you've already made your choice, then I won't say anything. Nan Gong Hen shook his head with a wry smile, and his compassion grew stronger. There was a strange look on Su Ming's face, covered by the mask. When he saw the pitying look on Nan Gong Hen's face, the same look appeared in his eyes. The statue beside Su Ming had already completely resuscitated. He moved his body for a while, and cracking sounds came from within him, as if he could not bear with moving. This made Nan Gong Hen pity Su Ming even more. It was especially so when the spirit of 9 yin started slowly shrinking as he moved until he stood there like a normal person with a bent back. This was clearly a hunchbacked, old spirit of 9 yin. His armor might be silver, but it was dark and dull. When he wore it on his body, he looked rather sloppy. When Nan Gong Hen saw this, he sighed in his heart. He could already understand just how good of a judge of character Su Ming was. In his mind, this was no longer a problem with being a bad judge of character. This was a problem of his intelligence going down the drain. Lad, choosing me is your fortune. Oh well, I'll protect you all the way on behalf of your spirit plunders, but we're doing it according to the deal we made. I will not calculate the price by days, but with each 3 times I attack, you have to give me a spirit plunder. The old man's voice echoed in Su Ming's head. He looked at the hunchbacked old man before him. This old man might be wearing a helmet and was decked in armor, but he looked incredibly strange in this appearance. However, Su Ming was very respectful towards him. He wrapped his fist in his palm to salute the old man. I will do my best to fulfill your requirements, senior. The old man was quite satisfied with Su Ming's show of respect, so he took off his helmet, held it under his armpit, revealing a very unique countenance. His dark skin looked like wood, and when set against his long silver hair, it made the hair incredibly eye-catching. Once Su Ming saw the old man's face, his pupils shrank. This person's appearance was highly similar to the gigantic head that was placed high on top the stone pillar in Shaman City. Clearly, they were from the same tribe. The old man's face was filled with wrinkles and his eyes were unfocused. After a yawn, he swept his gaze past Nan Gong Hen, and his lips curled up in a smile. In Su Ming's eyes, that smile looked quite nasty. The old man grinned and said in a raspy voice, "You, boy. This man is a heroic and exceptional one. You did well to choose the best lad in my tribe. Not bad indeed. You have a good eye." Nan Gong Hen's sympathy towards Su Ming increased once again. Just as he was about to open his mouth and say something, he suddenly widened his eyes and saw the old man lifting his head to look at the spirit of 9 yin he had rented, then said something that stunned him in place. "Hey, dummy, where's my share?" The old man glared and looked at Nan Gong Hen's spirit of 9 yin standing in midair. At that moment, Su Han, the spirit, brought out a ball of glittering light from his bosom obediently and handed it to the old man respectfully. The old man shook the ball with his hand, then nodded his head, satisfied. He quickly put it away into his own bosom, all while not forgetting to address the stunned Nan Gong Hen in the process. "Boy, you have a really good eye. Don't worry, if that dummy is disobedient, then I'll teach him a lesson afterwards. Don't you worry, all the tribesmen I introduce are absolutely free of problems. Hey, how about we go now? It's been a long time since I went out. I wonder how many things have changed in the outside world." The old man turned his head around and looked at Su Ming, urging him on. Su Ming cast Nan Gong Hen a compassionate glance, then let out a fake cough before he walked forward. The old man had his hands placed behind his back, following behind him with a swagger, even humming a little tune, all while looking incredibly smug. Nan Gong Hen only recovered after a long while. He looked at the old man leaving into the distance before he lifted his head and looked at the spirit of 9 yin called Su Han. He suddenly felt that this originally heroic and extraordinary spirit looked like a rather rigid person. In fact, he seemed kind of silly. His mind kept going back to the moment the old man had demanded his reward and his acts of praising Nan Gong Hen himself. He shuddered, then slapped his own head before he started laughing wryly. This is the first time I heard about of the spirits of 9 yin conning people. Just like that, Nan Gonghen brought with him regret and dispiritedness, along with the spirit of 9 yin that had turned into a mark on the back of his hand, then left the dimension through the vortex in the air with Su Ming, and the old man who made him grit his teeth but whom he did not dare offend. The instant the old man walked out, he lifted his head and looked at the gigantic head lifted up high on the stone pillar. A complicated look along with nostalgia appeared in his eyes. The complication quickly disappeared and he averted his gaze to look at the shackled skeleton in the palace behind the vortex. The instant he saw him, the old man sighed. Lad, I'm going to meet an old friend of mine. As long as you are in the city, I'll be able to detect you. When you want to leave, I'll appear. If you need me to attack, then call out the name I told you, and I will naturally attack. The old man said with a flat tone, then took a step forward. His body instantly disappeared. When the old man left, Nan Gonghen wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming with a wry smile. Brother Mo, I'll cut myself off here. I'd like to go back and clear my mind in the inn, then communicate with my spirit of 9 yin. Once the treasure gambling even starts, I'll come out. Are you coming with me, or do you want to go explore Shaman City? Su Ming felt some degree of pity towards Nan Gonghen, but just when he was about to speak, a glint suddenly appeared in his eyes, because he saw a person looking at him while standing at the foot of the palace's stairs. Brother Nan Gong, please go back first. I'll be exploring the area here. Su Ming wrapped his fist in his palm to bid farewell. Nan Gonghen, who was feeling incredibly dispirited, did not have any mood to say anything anymore. He shook his head and left the place quickly. Once Nan Gonghen left, Su Ming looked towards the person standing at the bottom of the stairs, and their gazes met. His lips curled up into a smile under the mask, and he walked down the stairs. As he got closer to the person who was observing him, the thin young man who was dressed in black robes and had various small braids decorating his hair started, his pupils shrinking, but he continued standing there without moving. When Su Ming walked down that long staircase and arrived right before the person, the young man suddenly smiled. His shrunken pupils dilated. He looked at Su Ming and wrapped his fist in his palm, giving him a small bow. It's a great joy in life to be able to meet an old friend in foreign land. I was wondering why I thought you were familiar. Now I remember. Brother Su, you still look as graceful as when we parted ways, the young man said with a smile. He was Wu Duo, the person who Su Ming had met when he was heading to Sky Mist City, and the person who had a mysterious background and seemed like a thought soothsayer from the shamans. Brother Su, you don't have to argue with me, I'm very certain of this. We're not strangers, since I waited for you here and could identify you, then it proves that I'm not that sort of despicable person, or else, there would be no need for me to do this. Brother Su, your disguise is really great. It doesn't matter whether it's your presence or the general air you give off, no one would be able to find any clues about you. Even if I used any of Thought's soothsayer spells to look into you, I wouldn't be able to find any answers. However, ever since I was young, I possessed a talent no one else had. I'm very sensitive to smells. Brother Su, you can change everything, but you neglected to change your smell. Wu Duo spoke with a faint smile, and his words were filled with sincerity. My name is Mo Su. Su Ming looked at Wu Duo. My name is Zhong Yi. Brother Mo, it's a great pleasure to meet you for the first time. Would you mind finding a place with me so that we can sit? Wu Duo cast a glance at the mark of the spirit of 9 yin on the back of Su Ming's right hand, then spoke in a whisper. You must have come here for the treasure gambling event as well. I know quite a lot about this. Perhaps we can even work together. Su Ming mulled over it for a moment, then nodded. Chapter 438, Crimson Stone. The Shaman City belonging in the world of 9 yin was built a very long time ago. Even now, besides the city giving off an ancient feeling to others, it did not give off too much of a feeling of decline. Instead, as time went by, the city was continuously improved, causing it to be incredibly prosperous. It was especially so each time the world of 9 yin was opened up and a large amount of shamans surged in, which would cause the city to bustle with activity, and there were numerous shops which would still be visited even at night. It was a bit past noon. In a two-story inn located in the west of the city were Wu Juo and Su Ming, who were sitting at a table while looking at a river running through the entire shaman city. Sounds of running water echoed in their ears, adding another sort of taste to the wine they drank. The person who fought against the latter shaman from Eastern Goosefoot tribe yesterday must have been you then, Brother Mo. When I saw you walking out from the place of the spirits of 9 Yin with Nangong Hen by your side, I could already guess. Wu Juo smiled, and there were all sorts of emotions in his eyes as he looked at Su Ming. I didn't expect that in a few years since the last time we met, your level of cultivation would have went up by leaps and bounds. It's indeed impressive. Su Ming shook his head and said slowly, being able to fight against Senior Tai Mu was just pure luck on my part. Oh. Brother Mo, you don't have to be humble. I might not have seen it, but when I heard about it from others, I could tell that you definitely did not manage to survive by pure luck. Wu Juo smiled and took a sip of wine. When he heard Wu Juo phrasing it as such, Su Ming smiled faintly and no longer spoke about that. Instead, he looked at Wu Juo and said calmly, Brother Zhong, what are the details of the treasure gambling event you mentioned? I don't know much about it, so I hope you would be able to tell me. Brother Mo, you must obtain a sufficient amount of shaman crystals before the treasure gambling event. Only then will it be possible to reap any sort of rewards from the event. Of course, if you're only going there to take a look and not to join it, then you won't need to do this. Wu Juo took a sip of wine, cast Su Ming a look, then said with a smile. This treasure gambling event is actually a unique thing that only appears in the world of 9 Yin. It is divided into 2 parts. All people who have more than 100,000 shaman crystals can join the first part of the event. Only those who have become latter shamans can gain from the second part. Most people whose level of cultivation is not high enough would not choose to enter the second part, unless they have great luck. If not, most of them would end up really badly. Wu Juo spoke in great detail. He knew that Su Ming might have gained some knowledge about the event, but since he was not a shaman, there must still be some details that he was not entirely clear about. Oh. Please, I would like to hear it. Su Ming brought the wine cup to his lips and took a sip. Wu Juo gathered his thoughts for a while, then looked around before he asked in a whisper, Brother Mo, do you know why this place is called the World of 9 Yin and do you know how this name came to be? Su Ming looked at Wu Juo. He did not speak. He knew that Wu Juo did not require any answer from him. Besides the Yin spirit tribe telling the name to the shaman's ancestors in the past, it originated from a stone monument that was once erected at a spot somewhere in this place. There were only 4 words on the stone monument, and they were World of 9 Yin. As for the Yin spirit tribe, it's this. Wu Juo said, then lifted his left hand to reveal the glowing mark on the back of his hand. In the past, when the shaman's ancestors arrived in the world of 9 Yin, they somehow got into contact with Yin spirit tribe, allowing them to be able to get their help to occupy an area of 1 million lees in this place in one go, though it was over a period of many years. They also managed to get their help to build Shaman City. The treasure gambling event is actually largely connected to the spot where Shaman City is built. Wu Juo's voice was soft. It did not spread too far, and only Su Ming could hear it clearly. They chose to build Shaman City on the ground right underneath our feet because there is a gigantic secret in this area. It was very difficult for outsiders to learn about this secret, and it was not until many years later, when an End shaman who participated in building the city told his descendants of this secret before he died that more shamans learned about this through a series of complicated events. Brother Mo, it's definitely difficult for you to guess this. Before we built Shaman City over this land, this place was a giant pit. There were many crimson-colored stones stored in it. There was nothing strange about those stones, but we could not send our senses and perceptions into them. When we cracked them open gently, we found some strange herbs inside. The famous 9 Abyss flower is one of them. In fact, there are still plenty of herbs that are not recorded by the shamans, and even those from 9 Li tribe cannot recognize them. They should be treasures of immeasurable worth that were rare even during ancient times, and have long since become extinct. However, a brilliant flash passed through Wu Juo's eyes. Most of the crimson stones have nothing inside. Well, actually, they might have had something inside before, but because they had been around for too long, those things gradually dissipated. Only few among the crimson stones contain herbs, and even so, most of them have already turned into fossils. There are no longer any sort of medicinal properties within them. And even if some herbs still contain medicinal properties, there won't be much of it left anyway. However, there is no absolute in this world. Some of these crimson stones that have been cracked open before were found to contain herbs that still contain 7/10 of their medicinal properties. In fact, from what I know, there were 9 times over the years where complete, undamaged herbs that still retained all of their medicinal properties were found in these crimson stones. These herbs are all incredibly old, and each of them could be called a priceless treasure. But it all depends on luck. If you're lucky, perhaps the herb's original value itself is already high to begin with. If you're not lucky, then it would be an ordinary leaf. Even if it was still fresh, it would still be. Wu Duo sighed deeply with feeling. As Su Ming listened to Wu Duo's words, his eyes began sparkling. We calculate the value of the herbs based on 2 things. One of them is the quality of the herb itself, and the other is the medicinal properties the herb contains compared to other herbs with the same effects. Herbs are not the only things contained in crimson stones either. There are also ancient enchanted vessels and some skill manuals. All of these are things you might find in there. It just depends on whether you can find them and whether the item you get can still be used. Due to its mysteriousness and because even shamans will have difficulties in finding any sort of clue from these stones, this luck-based cracking of crimson stones has gradually turned into the treasure gambling event. This sort of heart-pounding excitement is something many people cannot resist. The crimson stones that can only be bought with a large amount of shaman crystals can be said to be able to make a person rise to great heights in an instant, and it can also make a person lose everything in an instant as well. Wu Duo licked his lips. Clearly, he was very passionate about this treasure gambling event. These crimson stones are valuable. Even if it is incredibly rare for herbs and treasures to appear within them, with the god of Shaman's temple's power and influence, there's absolutely no need for them to hold this treasure gambling event. They could just crack open all the stones on their own. By doing so, they wouldn't have to lose anything. Su Ming frowned. Brother Mo, you might not know about this, but that's what the god of Shaman's temple did in the beginning. But as time passed by and the secret of this place spread through the entire shaman tribe. The god of Shaman's temple's influence might be great, but the big tribes in the land of the shamans would absolutely not let it monopolize the chance of obtaining priceless treasures. Even those middle-sized tribes have set their sights on this event. It's only under the pressure of all the tribes in the land of the shamans that the god of Shaman's temple brings out a portion of the crimson stones every single time they open up this place and host this treasure gambling event. Wu Duo explained. Su Ming pondered over this for a moment before he voiced his thoughts. Even so, the big tribes must have also joined the team of people who developed this place. It's impossible that they didn't know about this. If that's the case, what you're saying is a little far-fetched. Besides, how could there still be crimson stones in this place after such a long time? And by the looks of it, they still have quite a lot of these things left. This is something I don't understand as well. Wu Duo hesitated for a while before he said with a lack of confidence, perhaps there are some reasons that I don't know of regarding the former matter you speak of, but no matter what they may be, the god of Shaman's temple has been hosting this treasure gambling event involving all shaman tribes for many years. There is in no way you can fake this, and there have been people who have indeed been able to find valuable herbs in these stones. The 9 times I spoke of are examples. As for the second, well, Brother Mo, you still don't really understand this world of 9 yin. The amount of crimson stones in this world is incredibly large, but we can't extract too many of them in one go. We can only get them out slowly. That is how the god of Shaman's temple is able to bring out these crimson stones every single time they open up the place. Legend has it that there are several huge tunnels underneath Shaman City. These tunnels were all dug out through the years, during the process of mining for these crimson stones. But it's true that the number of crimson stones that are brought out is smaller with each treasure gambling event. I didn't come here when this place was open to public the last time, but I heard later that they only brought out about 10,000 of these stones. It's a little fewer than the previous times. Su Ming thought about it quietly for a while. There might be some things he still did not understand about this, but Wu Duo did not seem to know everything either, which could only mean that these things were not privy to a medial shaman. Brother Zhong, is the second part of the treasure gambling event you speak of a small-scale event that is limited to only certain people who have certain levels of cultivation, and is held in another place that is like a trading zone, in a manner almost like an auction? Wrong guess. There is indeed small-scale auctions like these during the treasure gambling event, but those are held in private. They are not considered as the second part of the event. The second part of the event is incredibly bloody, and people frequently die in this part. Its name is also known as Stone Looting Event. The end shaman who is protecting Shaman City will definitely not take action. This is a contest between latter shamans, and the location is in one of the 3 small crimson stone veins that are usually closed off to public. They are all located within these 1 million lees. Some crimson stones will gush out of these small crimson stone veins once in a while. After some preparations, the god of Shaman's temple will be able to make these veins gush out a large amount of crimson stones for a short period of time. It depends on the person's abilities on how many they are able to loot. When the time comes, a relocation rune will be activated. The original rule states that everyone with any sort of level of cultivation can enter it, but few medial shamans go. But since there's that catastrophe of the eastern wastelands, the pressure of the threat of death from this disaster will drive those who want to survive through it mad. The number of those who will risk their lives in this event will be a lot higher compared to previous times. What I want to discuss with you is the second part. If you're willing to help me, then I will give you some of the crimson stones I'll obtain. I can promise you, if everything goes smoothly, then we will get a large amount of crimson stones. Wu Duo looked at Su Ming with an expectant look. Chapter 439. Selling Items. Su Ming did not immediately speak. Instead, a pensive look appeared on his face. After some time, he asked unhurriedly, "Brother Zhong, what method do you have to be able to obtain a large amount of crimson stones from under the noses of numerous latter shamans during the second part of the treasure gambling event?" This is. Wu Duo hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. He continued, "Please forgive me for this, Brother Mo. If you're willing to work with me, then I will tell you in detail. The only thing I can say is that for this to work, I've already enlisted 3 of my shaman friends for help. Our likeliness to succeed is 6 out of 10, but if you join us, then we will have 7 or even 8. Once he finished speaking, Wu Duo looked at Su Ming with eyes filled with sincerity. After a moment, Su Ming shook his head and replied in a hushed voice, "I need to think about this. I can't give you an answer at the moment." He could understand why Wu Duo could not tell him in detail. After all, if Su Ming was the one making the deal, he would react like this most of the time as well. However, this was too much of a risk, and if he was just to place his judgment based on the rewards itself, then unless the rewards were truly great, he was otherwise not the type to take risks for something unknown, which in this case were the crimson stones, whose existences were already a gamble on their own. "All right, I hope you'll think about it carefully. I hope to be able to work with you again, Brother Mo." Wu Duo was not expecting that Su Ming would immediately agree to this either. After all, trying to fight over the crimson stones against latter shamans would end in their deaths if they were even the slightest bit careless. The fact that Su Ming did not reject him right from the get-go was already a good thing in Wu Duo's books. He knew that Su Ming was a cautious person. It was something he had learned when they had met and worked together before. He also knew that if Su Ming said that he would think about it, then he would definitely do so instead of using it as an excuse. That was why he did not continue trying to persuade him. After all, even if he truly wanted Su Ming to join him, if he said too much, it would just end up backfiring on him. Wu Duo talked to Su Ming a little more about the legends in the world of 9 yin, and when dusk was about to arrive, the 2 of them left the place. Su Ming did not immediately return to the inn, but started taking a stroll around Shaman City. There were quite a large number of shops there, and they were selling a lot of items Su Ming had never seen or heard of before. In fact, there were also some herbs that were usually rare in the world outside being sold in large quantities here. In Shaman City itself, Su Ming could already find about 7 to 8 of the herbs drawn on the bamboo slip he had, which had a large amount of medicinal herbs listed on it. This made him incredibly excited. After all, while Su Ming was still reluctant to use the spirit plunders, he had to open the next door in that strange dimension. But as time passed by, there would come a day where he would still need to create the medicinal pills that came after spirit plunder. Even if he did not know what the next medicinal pill was called, and neither did he know what sort of herbs he needed, but if he bought some of every type of herb he could find, he would still be able to get some that were useful to him. In his excitement, Su Ming spent almost all of his time the next few days in search of herbs in Xiamen City. Not only did he manage to find a large number of medicinal herbs listed on the bamboo slip, he also found all the materials required to make scattering dust, south asunder, mountain spirit, and even spirit plunder. All of these materials were sold separately and in small amounts. In fact, there were quite a number of these herbs that were used in other manners, but in Su Ming's eyes, these herbs were all treasures. However, the number of shaman crystals Su Ming had was incredibly limited. While the price for these herbs was not high, if Su Ming wanted to buy all of them, then he would still need to spend quite a lot of shaman crystals. Besides, Wu Duo had also mentioned that if he wanted to try his luck during the treasure gambling event, he would need to prepare a large amount of shaman crystals. Nonetheless, Su Ming did not have too much of an interest towards this treasure gambling event. To him, the percentage of being able to win was simply too low in this sort of treasure gambles. He did not have too many shaman crystals for him to gamble anyway. The disparity between the effort and reward was simply too great. I can choose not to enter the treasure gambling event, but I'm almost running out of shaman crystals to buy these herbs. This is a little troublesome. Half a month later, Su Ming stood by the window in his room at the inn, caught in a mix of joy and gloom. He was happy because he had browsed through almost all of the shops in Xiamen City and bought a large amount of medicinal herbs, causing him to be confident in being able to create more medicinal pills. He could even create about 10 spirit plunders from the herbs he had at hand, though it was still a problem for him to get living dead people. But he was feeling dejected because he was running low on shaman crystals. When he saw that there were some medicinal herbs that he could not buy, he was worried that once he missed this chance, there would be required an unknown amount of time before he could come to the world of 9 yin again. Oh well, I'll have to sell medicinal pills. Thank goodness I've been asking around in secret when I was buying herbs, so I know quite a bit about this. While the selling and trading of medicinal herbs is incredibly rare here, but there are still people who do it. A glint flashed through Su Ming's eyes, and he made his decision. He had been asking about by beating around the bush during the past few days to know whether medicinal pills such as scattering dust could be sold. Once he walked almost the entire Xiamen City, he had actually managed to find a shop with 2 scattering dusts, though there were barely any medicinal properties left in them. However, the smell of the pill allowed Su Ming to recognize that its method of creation should be identical to his own scattering dust, even though there were still some details that were different about them. Su Ming lifted his right hand, then once he turned it over, 3 scattering dusts immediately appeared on his palm. The color of the 3 scattering dusts was radiant, and they were letting off wisps of refreshing medicinal fragrance, making them incredibly exceptional. He stared at the 3 scattering dusts in his hand, then put them away. Once he did so, he sat down cross-legged on the bed in his room and started meditating with his eyes closed. During the past half a month, he did not have time to bother with Lan Lan and Ahu, but he had left the brand of his divine sense on them. If the 2 of them got into any sort of danger, then Su Ming would rush over just like he did half a month ago. Su Ming had made a promise. If he had not agreed to the patriarch's request from White Bull Tribe, he could have ignored them, but since he made a promise, then he would fulfill his promise to the best of his abilities. Outsiders would only be able to see and think about the rewards he would gain based on the importance he placed on fulfilling promises, but in truth, in his heart, he did not want to break any more promises to anyone else. That was why, even though it did not seem like Su Ming was placing a lot of attention towards Lan Lan and Ahu, that was not the case in reality. Night went by. When the next morning arrived, Su Ming opened his eyes, and a glint appeared within them. He got up and left the room. Nan Gong Hen was still in isolation, having not left his room during the past half a month. Su Ming swept his gaze past Nan Gong Hen's room, then looked away and left the inn. After a brief stroll through Xiamen City, he changed his appearance without anyone noticing him. His mask was no longer on his face, and he wore a straw hat on his head. He looked a little more built than he originally was. Outsiders would not be able to see the details on the extra mass he gained, but in truth, Ji Yun Hai's black beetles had already stuck themselves on Su Ming's body under his clone's will, causing his body to become taller and buffer by 1 whole size. Once he was done changing his appearance, Su Ming appeared outside a large shop in a rather lively street. It was a 6-story shop, and there were only about 10 of such shops in Shaman City. There was a stone monument stuck right in front of the shop, and there were 3 huge words carved with a flourish on it: 9 Shaman Pavilion. Su Ming came to this 9 Shaman Pavilion twice during the past half a month, purchasing a large amount of herbs each time. He knew that this was a place with nearly all types of herbs, and besides herbs, this pavilion sold almost everything else. It did not matter whether it was enchanted vessels, weapons, unique items belonging to the world of 9 yin, or even some information not privy to others. The things they sold were quite all round. Su Ming averted his gaze. He was wearing a bamboo hat at the moment and had his divine sense enveloping his entire body, which also had the power of his nascent soul fused within, causing his aura to be incredibly mixed up, but also looking quite balanced. He walked into 9 Shaman Pavilion. The ground floor of the pavilion was huge and looked incredibly spacious. There were 3 big, broad stone walls that were several dozens of feet tall right at the center of the building. On these stone walls there were some glowing words, and there were some shamans who were reading them at the moment. Occasionally, they would walk hastily towards the shop attendants dressed in uniforms waiting on both sides of the stone walls. Usually, after a brief, hushed exchange, the attendants would guide them to enter one of the dozens of closed-off chambers located around the hall on the ground floor. Su Ming had come to this place twice before, so this was his 3rd time here. He was already familiar with the place. He knew that the glowing words on the 3 stone walls were the items that were for sale, and if people were interested, they could go to the shop attendants to make a deal. Right at the back of the hall on the ground floor was a relocation rune that was several dozens of feet big. This rune would only relocate a person to one place, and it was the 1st floor, and besides this relocation rune, there was no other way to enter the 1st floor. Su Ming swept his gaze across the hall. No one was able to see his appearance, since it was covered by the straw hat, but that messy but balanced aura had captured the shop attendants' attention. One of them, a middle-aged man, immediately took a few steps forward to stand in front of Su Ming and wrapped his fist in his palm before bowing towards him. "My friend, how may I serve you?" The middle-aged man was a medial shaman, and he did not seem too weak. He looked at Su Ming with a smile on his face. "I'm here to sell things," Su Ming said flatly, and his words were few. "Oh, sir, what are you selling?" 9 Shaman Pavilion will offer a satisfactory price for any and all sorts of treasures in the world based on the price they should have. As the man smiled, he sent his perception outward, and when it gathered on Su Ming, a great wave of power immediately bounced off him, causing the man's expression to change, and he instinctively took a few steps back. Since when did 9 Shaman Pavilion started being so oblivious to the rules? Su Ming's raspy voice came from underneath the bamboo hat. His voice was incredibly ghastly and sounded as if it was a terrifyingly biting, cold chill. When the middle-aged man was bounced off by Su Ming's divine sense, he felt as if there was thunder booming in his head. The strength of that divine sense was so great that even latter shamans would feel fear towards it, much less this male medial shaman. The man's face immediately turned pale, and just as he was about to speak, Su Ming let out a cold harumph and flung his right hand outward, immediately tossing out a small white bottle. "Bring this to your manager. I will only wait for the time of the burning of an incense stick on whether you will accept this or not." Su Ming's voice echoed in the air in an aloof manner. The middle-aged man instinctively caught the small white bottle, and while he was shocked and terrified by Su Ming's power, he opened the bottle and sniffed it after lowering his head. He frowned. There was a medicinal fragrance within that small bottle that smelled rather extraordinary, but the bottle was empty. There was only some of that fragrance lingering inside. Out of caution, once the man wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming and bowed, he walked towards the relocation rune, then disappeared with a flash. Su Ming stood in the hall and his expression remained as calm as ever under the straw hat. However, before half the time required for an incense stick to burn after the man disappeared, the relocation rune shone once again, and the man walked out with a look of shock on his face. Behind him was an old man. Chapter 440, Su Ming's Shock. There were not many changes on Su Ming's face while he remained hidden under the straw hat. However, he did focus his attention and sized up the old man. He looked to be a medial shaman as well, but Su Ming noticed that while the relocation rune shone and the middle-aged man with Su Ming's bottle was the first one to walk out, he instinctively slowed down a little, causing the old man to be able to overtake him and making the middle-aged man to be the one following. When this minor detail fell into Su Ming's eyes, it allowed him to find some clues. There was still shock on the middle-aged man's face. When the old man looked towards Su Ming, he took a few quick steps forward and stopped 10 feet away from Su Ming. "I am Zhuo Dao Ming. Sir, this way, please." The old man turned all his attention towards Su Ming and was very polite towards him. He even wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed. Su Ming gave him a slight nod, then walked forward in a relaxed manner. The old man followed behind him. When the both of them walked past the spot where the middle-aged man was, the man immediately lowered his head and bowed respectfully. Su Ming did not bother with the man. He walked straight towards the relocation rune with the old man beside him. Then as the relocation rune shone, they disappeared. Only when Su Ming left the place did the middle-aged man let out a breath of relief. The memory of him bringing the small bottle to the first floor resurfaced in his mind. The manager of the first floor had originally been displeased about it, but when he took the small bottle over and sniffed it, his expression immediately changed drastically and he quickly went to the second floor. By this point, the man already had no idea which floor manager was in possession of that small bottle. However, by the looks of it, that small bottle was definitely not any common item, but the man simply could not wrap his mind around just what made that bottle so extraordinary. The light from the relocation rune made Su Ming's vision blur slightly. A slight medicinal fragrance wafted into his nostrils. That scent was very odd, but when he tried to get a detailed sniff, it was gone. Besides that medicinal scent, the first thing Su Ming saw was a man sitting by a desk made of purple wood, positioned right ahead of him. That man wore a white, long robe, and his face was as fair as a piece of jade. The man was incredibly handsome, and while he was a little old, the thin beard on his face made him seem even more striking. He had his head lowered as he sat by the desk, and he was holding Su Ming's bottle in his hand. There was a slight crease between his brows, making it seem as if he was frowning. Occasionally, he would take a sniff from it, and then he would close his eyes slightly. "Grandmaster Yu, I brought him here." Once the old man by Su Ming's side bowed to the white-robed man respectfully, he took a few steps back into the relocation rune. This man might not have given him even the slightest bit of attention, but he did not mind. The rune shone once again and he disappeared. At that moment, only Su Ming and the white-robed man remained at this floor of the pavilion. Su Ming remained calm. He could not really gauge this man's level of cultivation. When his divine sense fell on the person, a gentle power bounced it away, but that power was not alive. It actually felt quite rigid. Clearly, this person did not have a power that far surpassed Su Ming's own, but instead had some treasure that made it hard for others to examine him using divine sense. If Su Ming truly wanted to check this man's power, then he would need to force his way through. While he had the confidence that he would be able to break this power that bounced him off, there was no need for him to do so. The white-robed man did not speak, and neither did Su Ming. He swept his gaze across the floor. This was a room that absolutely could not compare to the size of the ground floor. It was only about a third of it. There were a dozen something illusionary, glowing objects floating around, causing this floor to be brightly illuminated. There were black stone boards spread on the floor and even some sculptures that protruded off the walls around them. These sculptures were not of birds, but were an endless amount of plants and flowers that looked alive. It was a pity that they did not have color, or else there was a possibility that a person would feel confused as to where he was when he cast his first glance into the room. Right before Su Ming and behind the white-robed man sitting by the long purple wooden table was a window. Sunlight shone through it, making the room seem like a fantasy. When Su Ming was about to look away from the window, his gaze suddenly focused, and he cast a scrutinizing look at the sky outside the window, and then he felt his heart quiver. What he saw was an endless mass of sky. He could not see the ground. "This isn't the first floor. If it was, then I would be able to see the ground. Judging by the height, this floor is at least the third floor." Su Ming no longer looked at the window, but cast his gaze at the center of the floor. There were 3 incense burners of the same size there. They were all about half the height of a person, and it would take 2 men to fully encircle them. Wisps of green smoke floated up from them, turning into layers of smoke rings that spread in all directions. The incense burners were not of a single color, but were instead of a variety of them. They looked incredibly pretty, but Su Ming only let his gaze stay on them for a moment before he looked at the thing placed at the center of these 3 incense burners. It was an oval-shaped stone. It was dark red and did not look smooth. It actually looked very ugly. There were even a lot of holes decked on it, and judging by the looks of these holes, they did not seem as if they were formed naturally, but were made by man. That stone was very big and surpassed the height of those incense burners. It was 20-something feet tall, and it was about the size of several of these incense burners. It was placed at the center of this floor and stood out like a sore thumb. As the wisps of smoke rising from the 3 incense burners turned into smoke rings in midair and started spreading out, some of them were absorbed by the small holes on the stone. Later, they would seep out from another hole. There had to be some sort of unique changes made within the stone that caused the smoke that seeped out of the stone to turn into smoke butterflies that looked as if they were dancing in midair. Even though they disappeared quickly, new smoke butterflies would reappear. The cycle repeated, and it could be even said that the sight could not be compared with anything else in the world. Su Ming took a few steps forward and stood before the big stone to look at the wisps of smoke surrounding that stone before turning into pairs of butterflies that danced with each other. Suddenly, the faint medicinal fragrance that he'd sensed before spread out faintly once again. The origin of it was between the stone and the 3 incense burners. Su Ming could smell it straight away, but when he tried searching for it, the smell was already gone again. As he looked at the stone, Su Ming's eyes sparkled. He extended his divine sense to the stone, but the instant his divine sense touched it, it was immediately absorbed by a powerful suction force. It was like a piece of stone sinking into the ocean. Unless he withdrew his divine sense right when he touched the stone, perhaps a large amount of his divine sense would be devoured. Su Ming's expression changed under the straw hat. He stared at the stone, and a surprised glint appeared in his eyes. Right at that moment, the faint and indistinct medicinal fragrance reached him once again. This time, even though the fragrance was still as faint as ever, but it was a little thicker than before. When Su Ming smelled it, while his expression remained as usual under the straw hat, he was already shocked to the core. Because right at that instant, he felt a faint ripple spreading out from the storage bag in his bosom. That ripple might only have lasted for an instant and everything returned to normal right at the next moment, but Su Ming knew that he was not imagining things. Besides his clone and the poison corpse, there seemed to be nothing else that could send out ripples from his storage bag, but the thing that made Su Ming shocked was not the clone, neither was it the poison corpse. Naturally, it was not the strange snake either. It was instead a material Su Ming had obtained a long time ago to create medicine. It was a small, black, humanoid creature contained within a gigantic mountain rock as if it was sealed within. Su Ming had obtained that rock from the auction hosted by Western Sea Clan outside Freezing Sky Clan. It was one of the main ingredients to make the welcoming of deities. Those ripples came from the mountain rock, or more accurately speaking, they came from the small black humanoid that looked as if it was dead. This item had once caused a small stir in the past, and after that, due to the Battle of Sky Mist, Su Ming hadn't had the time to ask around about what happened to the person from Enlightenment Gathering Tribe. In fact, he had already forgotten about this. When he saw the ripples from the mountain rock, Su Ming was shocked. He might have only seen this stone once, but through the discussions he had with Wu Duo, if he still could not recognize that this was the crimson stone that was used in the treasure gambling event, then he was no longer Su Ming. A small number of these crimson stones used for the treasure gambling event contain either completely fossilized, partially fossilized, or herbs that are not fossilized at all. This is incredibly alike to the small black humanoid contained in my mountain rock. However, one of them contains herbs, and the other a humanoid thing. Wu Duo also said before that there are not just herbs contained within these crimson stones, there are many other things contained inside as well. Booming sounds were going off in Su Ming's head. He had never linked these 2 items together before, but the mountain rock's ripples had lifted a corner of the fog's mystery. Could it be that the mountain rock containing this black humanoid actually came from this place? Su Ming was in shock as he looked at the stone before him. He was absolutely certain that the fragrance did not come from the incense burner's smoke from that stone. After all, the smoke from the incense burners was constantly around, and was unlike the medicinal fragrance, which was always faint and indistinct. Su Ming stood there for a moment before he took a few steps forward and got closer to the stone. He closed his eyes, and after a long while, the medicinal fragrance appeared once again. He sucked in a huge breath, and as he breathed in, a large amount of that medicinal fragrance entered through his nostrils and surged right into his mind. At that instant, he placed his divine sense on his storage bag to observe the black humanoid sealed in the mountain rock. It was right at that instant that Su Ming felt the small black humanoid shuddering a little, and he felt those ripples clearly. More ripples spread out, and if it was not in the storage bag and Su Ming didn't have his divine sense hiding it, then the people around him would have definitely been able to sense it as plain as day. Soon after, Su Ming's divine sense immediately saw black light flickering on the mountain rock in the storage bag and the small black humanoid shivering. Then, right in the midst of it all, a faint and blurry picture appeared at the center of its brows. That picture was of an herb with 7 leaves, and each tip of these leaves was sharp, looking like that of a poisonous snake's head. In fact, there was even one of the poisonous snake head-like leaves that would occasionally hiss with its forked tongue out of its mouth, and it looked as if it was alive. However, that was the only leaf that acted in that manner. The other leaves were dull, as if they were void of life, and only contained the shape of a poisonous snake's head. Sir, you have been watching this crimson stone for a long time. Could it be that you've seen it before? As Su Ming's heart was filled with shock, a gentle voice reached in his ears. Sir, you have been watching the small bottle for a long time as well. Could it be that you've smelled that medicinal scent before too? Su Ming asked flatly, having turned around and quelled the shock in his heart.